Here's what you should know about your local housing market in this week's Market Update. Today's July 10th. We're not quite there, but just about to the middle of July. Now, what is the middle of July? Well, typically when people ask me about when the spring market ends and the summer slowdown begins, I typically tell them sometime between the middle of July and the beginning of August. So we're going to keep a close eye out the next few weeks to see when that shift really happens. But quite honestly, we're likely to not realize it's happened until it's already happened. We are coming back from a holiday weekend, so we're going to see some interesting things happening in the stats. Keep in mind, these are not necessarily indicative of the direction of the market, but simply what I'd say is a rebound from a holiday week. So this week we're looking at stats from Morristown, Chatham, Madison, Harding, Marsh Plains, Mendham, Chester, Bernardsville, Basking Ridge, and Randolph. This past week we saw 45 homes come on the market. That's an 80% increase from last week. Now keep in mind, 45 is pretty consistent with what we saw in prior weeks. Last week was a very slow week with new inventory because, let's be honest, who's likely to put their house on the market the week before July 4th weekend, knowing that we were going to have a lot of people away for the weekend. Out of these new homes on the market this week, 29 of them were single-family houses and 16 of them were condos or townhouses. The average list price of these homes was $1,168,000. Total inventory. Currently, we have 268 homes actively on the market. That's 3% more than we had this time last week. So an ever so slight increase. Total homes sold. This decreased drastically. Once again, not surprising with the holiday weekend. Most people that were targeting around this time for closing were likely going to aim to close before the holiday weekend rather than after, seeing that most buyers were going to want to be in for that long weekend to possibly move in and unpack, and sellers don't want to have to be worrying about keeping their home in good shape over a holiday weekend. They want to get it off their plates. So this past week, we saw 22 homes sell. That's a 58% decrease over last week. Once again, last week we saw that abnormally high amount. This week, possibly an abnormally low. Kind of compounds to give a big decrease number of homes sold this week. Average list price of the homes that sold this past week, $1,074,000, and the average sale price was $1,167,000. So this past week we saw homes sell for an average of 9.5% above the list price. Now, every single town that had homes sell, we saw homes sell pretty substantially above the list price. Now, we had almost half of the towns that we look at not have any sales this past week. But the ones that did, we saw Basking Ridge with homes selling 5.5% above list price. Madison, homes sold 6.5% above list price. Chatham or Morristown, 10.6% above list price. Chatham, 11% above list price. Randolph, 11% above list price. And Chester, 12.5% above list price. So this past week, we saw homes sell substantially above list price. I would expect to continue to see that. We were talking just a few months ago about buyer activity quieting down, some homes sitting on the market longer. Yes, I'm still seeing that in certain price ranges, but overall, inventory is so light that I'm seeing that competition tick right back up. I've been talking this past week to a bunch of agents. Every one of these top agents are constantly picking each other's brains. Hey, you got anything coming on the market? Because we all have buyers that are still looking from that spring market, and there's just not enough new inventory coming on the market to meet that demand. So I'm expecting that, through the summer slowdown, that slowdown is really going to be mostly with inventory. I'm expecting that buyer demand is still going to remain strong, even if some buyers drop out and take a break. There's just a lot of leftover buyers from the spring still. And then under contract. Once again, under contract, the least complete data, but the most current. This past week, we saw 24 homes go under contract. That is 51% less than the prior week. Once again, not surprised, not only with buyers being on vacation this past weekend, but way less homes coming on the market last week. The average list price of these homes was $1,101,000. And the average days on market for the homes that did go under contract this past week were 32 days on market. Now that's 64% increase over prior week, but that's not terribly surprising because with such a low amount of new homes coming on the market last week, it's likely to see some homes go under contract that were sitting on the market a little longer. So that being said, thanks so much for checking in with me. I hope you have a great weekend. We're going to track to see how our seasonality comes into play as we get towards the typically slower summer months. But we'll catch you again next week and we'll see how things shape up.